Here we're taking a look at your basic KPI. I'm in Dashboard Designer, and I've got my workspace on open here, and all I did was I selected a folder, right-click, New, and came in and created a KPI. I'll real quick do that, and I created a blank KPI. We'll cover objective KPIs a little bit later on. Popped on up, and down here I went over to the Properties page and gave it a name, and then put it within a folder. And then over on the editor page. So I'm going to come through and select that and delete it so we don't garbage up our workspace. So I created a fixed KPI. First, let's just show you the fixed KPI before modification. I called it fixed before modification just so we could identify it. Obviously in the real world I would not do this. Property is fixed, and then a display folder. So here it is. Before I did any modification, we have actual and target. Actual would reflect the state of the data where we actually are at, and target would be where we hope to go. So moving across to take a look at it, you'll see down here target pops in the scoring pattern, and target is compared to the only other indicator I have up here, which is actual. So now I come across and number format. If I go into number format, I can come through and change the formatted output display to be whatever I'd like it to be. For example, if I change it down here to number, I can come through and change that, and I'll show you that in just a second. Now I've got data mappings. I'm using these as fixed, so where I'm actually at, I just manually entered an 8. Now we all know that all this is going to work much better if I use dynamic sources, which I'll do later on. And then the target, again, is 10. I'll cancel on out of that. And then the calculation field, when you click on calculation, you can see how it's calculated. The default is normalized weighted average. And then dropping on down, no value, data value, numeric value from an external source. And then dropping on down. These averages of children, sum, max, and min of children are when we go through and create a KPI that's going to roll up some values, which we'll do again later on. Now, if we take a look at just the standard KPI up here with the only modifications being 8 and 10, and take a look at it in the scorecard, the reason we're going to have to use a scorecard is so we can actually see it displayed. A scorecard, here, I created a scorecard, standard scorecard, new, scorecard. Popped on in, I picked standard blank because I didn't want any data sourcing, and I went through and it popped on up, and I created this and I named it fixed no modification. Fixed no modifications. And within the editor, I found my KPI and I took it over and dropped it over here so it would display. Then I can call update, and now it's showing where actual and target. Now this can be a little confusing. You see, actual down here is 8, so this is actually where I'm at. My target is 10, and I'm 8 is 20% below 10, and you notice I'm in the yellow range up in here. Now down here, let's take another look at a KPI that I've done some modifications on. Same KPI, but I copied it, and I called it fixed 1, clever name, and I changed. Let me show you it displayed up here so it makes more sense. Here it is, fixed 1. Instead of saying target and actual, I changed the name to where we are, added so far in here to the text field, and where we want to be is a 10, and I changed the indicator. And I did that like this. I just came through and changed the label, the number format, and here I changed it to number, and I added this text after so far, which is what you saw displayed up there. And then the fixed value, again, is 10, so we have the same range that we want to look at. Down here on this set scoring indicator, pattern threshold, which comes live, when I go down here into the target, I click this and I'll walk on through the wizard. Increasing is better. In this KPI, it's going to be better if I move more towards my target. And then I came down and I changed my indicators. All I did was I selected an uptrend, a downtrend, red, yellow, straight, and green going on up. Worst value 0, which would be pretty bad, and then I selected that. Now you see these patterns change down here. So if we come down and take a look at it, first look, the best is 120 or above. Threshold at 80, so greater than 80% is going to turn me green. Yellow is going to be between 80 and 50, and red down below 50% or less. So now coming back over and taking a look at the scorecard, see now I have this green uptrend arrow down in here. I'm off by 20%. I want to be by 10 and I'm 8. And at an instance down there, to me, the green up arrow tells me my trend is heading up, which is what I want to do. Remember back in this pattern down here, even though I'm still off by 20%, I'm in the yellow range. The reason is the scoring pattern. Let's look. This scoring pattern down here, look at the difference. 100%, 50%, right? So 50%, that is below 100%. 100% to greater than 50% is going to put me in the yellow range, whereas the other KPI, I had green up there, even though I was just slightly better than 80%, because I changed the threshold pattern to say if I'm greater than 80%, I want it to go into the green. If I wanted to change that, I could come through and select these selectors, and then I can just slide them through and change it like that, slide it on back, and that'll change it on out, which I personally hate. So, and I can change them by typing this on into. And it'll go through, and this is much easier, in my view, to come through and change that scoring pattern in there. All right, now let's see what just happened. So I'm going to go back over to my scorecard that displays this, and everything's the same because I have not yet called update. When I call update, you now see the scoring pattern has changed. So now I've got this yellow line, which matches what I had over in my fixed before modification scorecard. There we are. So I'm off, and now it's in there in the yellow. Continuing on, we're going to create a KPI with multiple actuals and multiple goals. So what I did was, over here in my KPI, I just right-clicked and copied the KPI, and then pasted it back on in. And so here it is, and I named it fixed to multiple. And if we come down and take a look at it, I changed up the actuals somewhat. I changed out the actual down here to callbacks per day. In this instance, what happens down here is this is a service center, and they want minimal callbacks per day. So I set in here the data mappings in here is 3, the callbacks per day for is what's actually happening, and then the goal, they want 1 callback per day. They've also taken a look at service calls per day, which they want to have increasing to increase productivity. And currently we're at 8, and we want to get to 10. So now if we come over, I created a new scorecard to take a look at it. And the first thing I did up in here is I have multiple goals. And so you can see down here I've got fixed to multiple, the name of the KPI, and 8 so far, which is the so far text left over from what I copied on in. Callbacks per day, 3, and then here's my goals coming on across. Now, at first glance, you can see this is fairly hard to read. Because what I have up in here is I drag this on across. We don't see what is related to what because the columns are not in the correct order. So what I did, let me switch on over. I rearranged it. I went through over here in the details pane and grabbed my metrics and just took it on over and assigned it to where I wanted to be, and then I dropped it out. So now I've got service calls per day next to SCD, which stands for service calls per day. So these two are aligned, so that at a quick glance we can see what we have up in here. Now callbacks per day, 3 is our actual, where we're actually at, and here's our goal. And if you notice, I changed out the indicators in here so they can get a little more granularity. I also made one really important change, and if we come in and take a look at our multiple KPIs and come in and take a look at the goal down in here, now we want this to be of a different pattern. So when I go in and set scoring pattern, what I did on, let me get into the correct one, service calls per day, set scoring pattern, I changed it from increasing is better to decreasing is better, because what we want to have happen is we want to move towards our goal. So as the numbers decrease, that would actually be better in here. And then I just changed the patterns, came through, and as you see, we decreased it on out. All right, now we'll create a data-driven KPI. So in the folder, I'm going to right-click, New, KPI, and I'm going to go in for blank KPI. down like this, and I've got it on up. And down here in the data mappings, I'm going to change source. And now I'm looking into the different data connections I have, and I've already added a connection into my data cube, and I named it SQL Server Analysis Services AdventureWorks. So I say OK, and now that I've got that connected in there, I can pull down, see loading. Now I can look at all the measures, all the things that can be aggregated within the data cube, and I can come down and select such as order count, etc. and say OK, and now I'm going to pull that data on in. Let's go down and take a look at one I've completely configured. I pulled in reseller gross profit, again off of the AdventureWorks cubes. Now you will note I did not add any filtering in, which I'll come back in and show you a little bit later on. You can add a filter into a KPI so that I can look at reseller gross profit and such a thing as gross profit by product line, etc. I didn't add it because this is the most restrictive filter there is. I can apply filters at either the KPI level, the scorecard level, or the page dashboard level. And I didn't want a filter here, so I didn't add one. Brought in my reseller gross profit, and I came down and I set a fixed value down here at 500,000. And again, the data mappings down here, this would probably be done rather than going in as a fixed value. I might go in here and change source and go in and add a new data connection into somewhere else where I had set up a set of values so that I could bring back in, such as off of a Sharepoint list, a pre-configured value rather than doing this manually. So I've got that on set. Everything else is the same. See, I've got the banding patterns as we drop on down. Then I took the retailer's gross profit, created a new scorecard, cleverly named retailer, expanded it on out, just grabbed my KPI, took it over and dropped it onto the scorecard, and now you see the actual and the target. As the actual changes, that's going to be reflected in my KPI. All right, here we're going to create a aggregate KPI. What I've done is I went in and just created a new KPI. I've used standard data value mappings in here. Everything's the same as the other KPIs we've created. I labeled them Child 1, Child 2, and Child 3, so they'd be easy to spot when we went into the scorecard. They have data mappings, just fixed values, 6 and 10, the default collation, and everything's the same as a standard KPI you'd look at. I did some changes up in here. Now I've got a 2 and a 10, and Child 3 down here is 11 and a 10. Then I went and created a parent KPI, and the parent KPI is just a standard KPI, except I changed the calculation methodology here to be average of children. And if you read this, corresponding target, blah, 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 it'll average it on up. Okay. And then I came in and I just created a scorecard to hold this, and I labeled it aggregate again so we could see it. The first thing I did was came in and grabbed my parent KPI and dropped it here. Then I grabbed each of the children, drag them on over until it would come through there and say next sibling. By the way, this is a little irritating, the work in here, because it's difficult to get positioning. But if you play with it, you'll get it. The little tags will pop on up. I'm not going to do that. Now you'll see each of the KPIs displayed below parent. The parent gives me the ability to roll on up. And remember, they're the average of the children. So what I'm saying down here in this business situation is these three KPIs have the same weighted value. So I have one of them that's doing really good, one doing really poorly, and one right in the middle. Rolling on up gives me an average of 37%. If I came back over to parent again, change this on out, and now if I change this to the sum of the children or the max of the children, so let's go in and say max of children just to change something. All right, now we'll come back over to the scorecard, and I'm going to call update. Now it popped on out. Look, everything's peachy because I've got one kid down here doing 10%, even though the rest of them are falling apart. So, although in certain business situations that could be great. If we have 3 targets, and if I'm trading stocks, and if I have one that I'm hitting a home run on and it overcomes the other 2, then that's fine. So it would depend on your business strategy.